It's afternoon here. Hey there, everyone. Good afternoon or morning or whatever time it happens to be for you where you are. My name is Eli Harrell. I am excited to be here today talking with Barry O'Reilly and just a little bit about what we're doing. I am a lifelong entrepreneur. I'm someone who's super dedicated to helping other people take more ownership of personal growth and lifelong learning. And I'm a big supporter of purpose-driven business. So this show is designed to tell the stories of people that are building businesses that are purpose driven so that we can learn from each other and increase the odds of success in that game. Today, I am very, very excited to be joined by somebody who I've become friends with over the last few years, Barry O'Reilly, someone who I follow and really appreciate the content he's created in this world and the ideas he shares with people. Barry is an entrepreneur, a business advisor, an author, and someone who's pioneering the intersection between business model innovation, product development, organizational design, and culture transformation. He's also an author whose books have been on the international bestseller list more than once. He is the founder of Nobody Studios, which is something I'm excited to talk about today. It's a crowd-infused venture studio with a huge mission to create 100 compelling companies over the next 5 years. So really excited to jump in. Barry's books specifically are called Unlearn, Let Go of Past Success to Achieve Extraordinary Results, which we will talk about that topic a little bit today. He also wrote Lean Enterprise, which was part of the Eric Ries series. So Barry, thanks for being here. I really appreciate this time.
No, it's great to be here. Thanks for the kind intro.
Yeah, my pleasure. So an hour is not a lot. Let's start out with telling the people who are listening today or later a little bit about your backstory. At least, thinking about the fact that the audience I'm designing this show for, are purpose-driven tech founders, people that are creating new solutions and products. Tell us a little bit about the snapshot of your backstory that led you to be kind of who you are now, and somebody who's able to do the things you're doing.
Yeah, well, like many people in this game, I think it's never a sort of straight line. I didn't wake up one morning and decide I was going to do certainly what I'm doing today, never mind 6 months ago. But, like I was really interested in technology, I suppose, growing up. And but I also really enjoyed business. So when I was probably going to university, there was a new course in Dublin. I'm from Ireland, where I grew up, that was sort of this half mix of business, where you'd learn anything from marketing, accounting, and just basic management, but at the same time have the chance to learn basic computing skills from programming, networking. And so it was a bit of a hedge, really, because I knew I enjoyed business, but I just had a strong sense that technology was going to play a huge role in the future. And I just wanted to learn both. And I still even remember the first day of university, I went and sat down in the first lecture, and the lecturer at the time, Don Ryan, who's gone on to become a great friend, opened up his laptop and started like writing this code on the screen. And I literally sat there for the first 2 or 3 minutes going, what is this? I think I'm in the wrong class. And literally, I'd say of maybe 100 people in the lecture hall, about 30% actually asked to stop and say, sorry, am I an FT 354? Is this the right class? And he's like, yeah, we're learning how to write Java. And a lot of people were sort of like just blown away, going, what, we're meant to be coding? And it was a funny moment. It was a bit real realization of getting exposed to all these different technologies. And I never thought I'd be writing code, but 4 years later, after university, huge portion of what I was doing was writing software. And that's just what got me started. After that, my first real sort of commercial experience was coming to San Francisco, just at the height of the .com boom, really. And I was working for a company called CitySearch, which was one of the first companies that was actually spun up out of Bill Gross's Idea Lab. And the idea was you'd pay $50 a month, and we'd come around and take photos of your cafe, ask you what your menu was, and you could have a sort of a website, as it was called, saying eliscafe.citysearch.com, and you could be on the internet. That was the offer. And like that just gave me great exposure to, what that world was about, fast technology building. From there, I went on and started a mobile games development company with a few folks, and then got into education on the back of that, teaching kids how to learn through gameplay, arithmetic, languages. And then after that, I actually started doing consulting for a while. I joined a company called ThoughtWorks, which is one of the real pioneering companies in the agile software development movement. Martin Fowler, one of these people who signed the Agile Manifesto, was the chief sort of science officer there, and that inspired me to go work there. And it was just a great experience for me over 6 years. And on the back of that, I went back into entrepreneur world and started my own company. And I guess at this stage, I've sort of grown into this sort of portfolio career now, where I do, I'm one of the co-founders of Nobody Studios, which is a venture studio, as you described. We're trying to do 100 companies in the next 5 years. I still do advising for other startups. The last one I worked with, Agile Craft, was bought by Atlassian. And, I still, from time to time, enjoy speaking, coaching, working with leaders from companies like Slack and Spotify and various different companies that I try to coach the leaders there, and get a lot of joy out of that. So it's a pretty broad spectrum. The studio is very much my main focus at the moment as we try to get it up and running. But I love a lot of things. So I like the diversity. Try to limit the context switching so I'm effective. But yeah, no, it's a passion to see as much and as many different things as possible.
I think you and I, excuse me, I think you and I have a lot in common when it comes to just the diverse experience set and international travel. Just having been in a bunch of different industries like you have, obviously leads you to the point where you've got a mental map of the world that's quite comprehensive and broad. I love that. So just touching back, you said after you learned how to code and you had some opportunities in actual development that you started a game development company, and then you went on from there into product, right? There was a period of time that you were really focusing on product ownership or leadership.
Yeah, well, basically, like I said, I started as an engineer, but I probably had one day a week where I went in at, at 5 o'clock and looked at the clock, and I went in at 9 and looked at the clock, and it was 5 o'clock. Like, the day just flew. 4 other days, I was bashing my head against a computer screen going, why won't this thing work? Or is missing a semicolon somewhere. So, like that was, again, one of these big learnings for me as I was in the actual mobile games development company. I was hired as a software engineer there. But what I found myself, again, because we were small and we were a startup, is that I just got more and more opportunity. Rather to figuring out, like, can we build it? I got to figure out, should we build it? And I just sort of grew into this role. And product management was, I don't even think it was a word back then, right? We still had just project managers and engineers, and that was basically it. And maybe you had a designer to help you make things look nice if you were lucky. Maybe a tester, but product was not necessarily a word back then. But so I thought I needed to be a project manager to sort of be more involved in figuring out what the solutions were or designing. And yeah, that just gave me, again, the startup gave me that chance to sort of figure that out. And, over time, that's where I started to fall more and more in love with that part of the process, or that stage was really this sort of synthesis, the customer research, prototyping, identifying needs, and thinking about ways to sort of tackle problems, start small, get them in market and iterate them. And that was just my thing. And, again, it's sort of like this story of my whole career is I've always had like a longer vision of where I sort of wanted to go, but the steps to get there have never been sequential, or they've never been perfectly like planned one after each other. I've just sort of really followed my curiosity and things that I'm interested in and things that fascinate me. And that's helped me sort of get involved in, worked in Australia, lived in London, in San Francisco, in Asia. I've pretty much lived in every continent now, apart from, Africa for a long term, or Antarctica. And maybe I'll do that, who knows? But it just, that's the way it's always been for me. And it gives me great opportunity. I think seeing the world from different perspectives, as you were alluding to, It helps you design better products. I think it helps you have better empathy. It helps you problem solve better. So yeah, it's been a massive accelerant for me.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing the backstory. I want to come back to some of the things you've learned and some of the ways you look at customer feedback in a bit. But
Yeah.
first, tell us a little bit more. I want to really dig into unlearning as well and your philosophies there. But first, I really would love to have you tell us more about what you're up to now and what is Nobody Studios and what's your vision for that?
Yeah, well, again, it's definitely not my vision. There's a collective of folks. The reason the company's called Nobody is because we're a bunch of nobodies trying to actually do something quite special. And the real inspiration behind that is, I think that the pace of innovation that we're seeing is much faster than people actually believe. I think we're about to see an explosion of entrepreneurs in very unexpected places. I think the internet was a sort of friendly paradigm shift. I think we're actually in the middle of 5 or 6 really key technologies maturing together and simultaneously causing more disruption than most people are even aware of and are able to anticipate. I think it's a fascinating time. But the way we build companies and startups are created is actually not designed to cope with that pace of innovation. So what we believe is that this idea of trying to build unicorns is a bit of a joke. It's sort of unicorn or bust mentality. You've these startups that are massive valuations after a pitch deck and a prototype, and they've not really shown any evidence that their product has any growth traction or sticking with customers. And again, the scary thing for founders that they don't realize is once you start getting a massive valuation and funding, the only way you'll actually see success from that startup or a return is you have to build a unicorn. You don't have any choice,
Yeah.
right? So people get locked into these businesses that was a pitch deck one day, and now they have to spend 10 years of their life on it and hope that it explodes, that they have a chance of seeing some reward. And I just don't think the world is like that. And what we believe is actually that what you want to be is much more nimble and much more responsive to opportunities as they emerge, build companies quickly, scale them really fast. Because as soon as you're sort of painting the walls on your new offices and you disrupting companies, going to be riding the wave of the next new technology that's going to sort of usurp whatever you betted on to make your business. So this notion of high velocity, speed and scale of company creation, a large ownership of these companies, and then early exits is pretty much the business model of what the studio will be about. We focus on de-risking pre-seed stage companies, early stage businesses, getting them stood up, getting them viable, profitable, even before they start to look at significant funding, and then letting them grow from there. And so for me, it's a little bit of a playhouse, I have to be honest. We've companies in health and wellness. We have companies in virtual events, employee care. I just, every type of business you can imagine, which is brilliant for me because I get to see a broad range of things and new technologies and seeing how we can actually bring them to market, and just working with some of the most fabulous, talented, interesting folks I have in a long time. And I'm excited. It's a bold ambition to do 100 companies. It means we probably have to look at 10,000 ideas and kill most of those to figure out what are going to be the winners. But it's a fun process trying to figure it out.
I'm excited for you. I think that sounds brilliant and fun. I came up with this term a while back. I think I borrowed it and changed it from someone else where I heard it somewhere else. But I love this phrase, human lifting infrastructure. And to me, it sounds like you're building a model that creates a, a playground or at least an incubation space for people to be able to build something faster than before. And sounds like you're seeing major issues with the venture capital model that's developed. You're not the only one. But tell us also a little bit about what you're planning to do or what you guys are already doing with your model when it comes to crowdfunding, because I'm pretty excited about what you're doing there.
Yeah, well, first of all, what is a venture studio, right? So for most people, when they hear the word venture, they think of venture capital. And venture capital is good. We're friends with them. We're not here to say that everything in that industry is wrong, but you have to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each of these components, right? Incubators are generally a group of folks who are dreaming up ideas, but they generally don't have any capital to sort of get them off the ground. You're sort of hoping if you find something, you go and source capital and try and grow it. Similarly, if you go into accelerators, you normally have the early stage of a product, but you have to give up some of your equity to be part of that accelerator for hopefully to get some mentoring, but basically a bit of branding and a stamp that goes on the outside of your startup to say, we were in Y Combinator. And then venture capital are fantastic at providing money to help companies scale, but they don't provide a lot of support. So really, a venture studio is bringing all these things together under one house. Like we raise our own capital, it's all our own funding. We have our own ideas that we want to go after. We build the teams, we give them support around sales, marketing, operations, product development teams. So really, the entrepreneurs get to focus primarily just on building the business. And a lot of the back office systems, as you know, as an entrepreneur, like you can spend your life just trying to figure out like what accounting platforms to use, what CRMs to use. Like it's endless, right? But if we can take a lot of that lifting, as you say, make it an easier lift for a lot of these entrepreneurs, and they can focus on growing the business, that's a huge accelerator to make the business go fast. And because of that, this is they're like, we're fully invested in these things. These are businesses that we'll own 70-80% of. So it's not like we're just sort of doing a mentoring call once a week and everybody feels good about themselves. There are businesses, we need them to be successful. We have a lot of skin in the game. So I think that's probably what's unique about the venture studio model. And then, as you kindly alluded to, what's even more unique about our model is typically for anyone even to get access to be able to invest or contribute to these early stage companies. Well, first of all, you've got to be in the right network, right? A lot of these sort of entrepreneurial networks are quite closed. They're difficult to get into. They're closed for a reason, because people want to keep them to themselves. And then investing in these early stage private companies here in the US, you're actually inhibited from it. You need to be an accredited investor, which means roughly that you need to have a personal wealth of over $1 million, or certainly be making over $300,000 for the last 3 years before you're even allowed to invest in private stage companies, right? There's regulation to inhibit it. So we're going to try and change that whole dynamic. We believe that because of the explosion of entrepreneurial everywhere, we want people to be able to bring their talent, influence, and capital to this studio. And we're going to be the first venture studio ever to offer equity crowdfunding, which means anybody with a couple of $100 will be able to invest in the studio and own a stake in the studio. And while that's really interesting, it's not just that you own a piece of the studio, you'll actually see upside from every company the studio creates ever. So by definition, you have a diversified investment from the start, and the barrier to entry is reduced from having $1 million a year to like in the few hundreds. And I'm hesitant to say it's democratization. I think is a big step, but it's giving more people access to this opportunity to build companies, to share companies that they're passionate about, and then see potential upside and wealth creation that goes with that. And that for me would be something I'll be really proud of when we get to that point, hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Amazing. That sounds like a beautiful vision for the future. I don't know if you want to connect these two topics together or not, but I've seen you post some things in LinkedIn about it sounds like you have a pretty good understanding of the fundamental technology behind NFTs and DAOs. And if you're willing to just talk a little bit about that, not to educate people on the backbone of every part of those technologies, but where do you see, you and I've talked a little bit about this, so I think I know that you think there's some potential here. Like what do you see for the potential in these technologies, and maybe connect it to the previous conversation if you want to.
Yeah, well, I think again, what's fascinating about DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations, is these are companies that are sort of formulated, and the policies that govern the companies are written down and stored on a blockchain, which means that they're, first of all, visible for all to see, and they're built into smart contracts about how decisions are made within the company. There's no CEO. It's a business governed by its rules or its policies that it's set. And And then you're really relying on people to make contributions towards improving that company or the mission of that company that people are aligned to and bought into. For many people, that is a very different organizational structure than they're used to, right? They're used to the idea of the corporate entity, maybe a founder or CEO who very hierarchical type organization, and you join the company, and you join the company, you get like your desk and a company t-shirt, and that's your badge as you wear your company t-shirt or your hoodie or whatever it is. And that's how you sort of self-identify as part of that community, right? You associate yourself to the company, and the company has its sort of structures and hierarchy and so forth. Where DAOs and NFTs or non-fungible tokens are literally a digitized version of all of this, where you're sort of decentralizing all of the ownership of these things. So DAOs, literally, you can say I'm going to create a DAO about learning how to create NFTs, right? And it's a company where people who are interested about understanding that can join and contribute and share ideas and write the policies of the company, the mission statement of the company, and it's all self-selecting, people contributing to that. Now, that in itself is just fascinating to me. It's just like, let's write a policy and start a company, and you don't have any idea whether you're dealing with a 5-year-old or someone who's like 95 and been in business. It's all based on the quality of the contribution they make, right? Because a lot of these companies or communities, people identify themselves through their avatars. And this is one of the reasons why NFTs, and there's so many possible innovations for it. But for people who are looking at NFTs and thinking about, oh, what price are they and how can I make money on them? I think that's like such a short-sighted view. The real magic behind NFTs is, again, it's a token to sort of demonstrate that you are part of some community, right? So what you often see with these decentralized organizations is that they will mint an NFT, which is like a sort of way of them raising funding for the community. So people sort of buy the NFT, which is like a badge or a signet, to say, I'm part of this community. I believe in this community's values. I think it's very special. And you'll see people then use the actual graphic from the NFT as almost like a branding to sort of say, I'm a crypto punk, or I'm crypto chicks, or I'm lazy lines, these communities, though, are self-selecting individuals. And the token is just a way to sort of signify themselves that they're part of that community. But it's also a really powerful way to start distributing benefits to people in that community. So once you own a token, people will be able to say, well, everybody who has a token is going to get a 15% discount on the t-shirts that we're going to make, right? And because you're part of that community, it's very easy to distribute and connect and be able to understand like who owns what or how much investment they have in the community. And that's a really powerful way to distribute different things across your community. Where if you go back to the analogy of thinking of a token just like a share in a company, right? It's so more convoluted to understand how shares are bought, who owns them, the value goes up, how you get them, how you distribute benefits from those things. Like, it's such a paper-based, heavy legal process. But in a decentralized organization with NFTs on a blockchain, you just basically have to say, everyone who has a token, send them $5. And it's done in literally 7 seconds. And all of it is auditable, all of it is tracked, all of it's immutable, right? So these are some of the powerful things about the way companies will be able to operate in a digital realm that is very, very different from the sort of paper logistics. It's all written down, and bureaucracy and slow down handovers that exist in the corporate world today. So it's a pretty exciting thing. For me, I think what we're trying to do, I think, is a little bit of a more familiar step in the these studios, like offering crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a way to raise money and build a community, right? Like, the reason we're doing crowdfunding is not because we think that's the only way to raise capital. We actually want to bring like 100,000 nobodies into our community, so they own a small stake in the company, a shares or a token of an NFT, if that's what you prefer. Like, these are all the same sort of types of ideas. And then suddenly we have, like, instead of just having 100 people in the studio, we've got 100,000, and they're all part of the nobody community, contributing their ideas, their talent, their capital to help build the companies. So as we're hopefully successful building these companies and we have successful exits, we can distribute all that wealth creation back to our community because they helped us not only stand up, but start to build these companies. And that becomes a really powerful mechanism for distributing more equitably both the excitement of building these companies, the opportunity to contribute, and then any wealth that's created with it. And, I very much imagine in the future, I could see us actually tokenizing a lot of what we do in different companies and moving to that type of model. But it's a big leap for folks at the moment. It's very early. And I think where crowdfunding is much more familiar, right? People have heard about it for 5 to 10 years. And even if they've never invested before, maybe investing with us on a crowdfunding might be the first time they ever do it, but it helps them start to get into more innovative ways to raise capital and identify yourselves with community.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing a very understandable kind of overview of those technologies and where you see them going. And I think that's just like the very tip of the iceberg of the future that we're going to witness. And I totally agree with you that it's very, very exciting. I see so many threads to pull on there and so many things that are going to change. One of them that excites me the most is any individual on the planet, regardless of location or age or anything else, if you build yourself into someone very valuable, you can deliver that value to an organization and be guaranteed that you will be compensated for it and appreciated for it. And that is just a very exciting future world to live in, if you ask me.
It absolutely is, right? And you have to understand, like, you and me are sort of like, long at the tooth in this innovation stage, right? You've got like kids that are like 14 and 15-year-olds who are highly collaborative, who they want to work in a very distributed and collaborative fashion. That's the world they live in. Maybe you and I grew up in the more corporate world of there was a manager and a boss and they told you what to do and what time to be in work at. And that is not how these generations operate. They operate based on merit. They are highly collaborative. They want to work together on things, on problems that they believe in. And the internet is their first language. Like that is how they operate. They communicate in communities. And being part of community matters to them. And so a lot of these tools are just ways that they're able to self-identify, or it's their metaphors for a company or a community is, I'm a lazy line NFT. That's what I'm buying. I love that community. I love their Discord group and the ideas that are talked about there. Maybe for us, we would have grown up going, wow, it's really interesting what Google are doing and the way they work. I wonder what it'd be like to work there. How could I ever get to be part of that community? Oh, I can't because I don't live or work in that area. It's just so far away from what today's world is about, and it's fascinating.
It really is. That kind of brings me to one of the topics I wanted to talk about. Let's jump into your, one of the things you're known for is the concept of unlearning, and the book that you wrote called Unlearn. One of the things I appreciated about that book is that it seems to me that you've clearly been influenced by Carol Dweck's work and the growth mindset, which is something that very much changed me when I spent time thinking deeply about that concept. And one of the topics under that I'd written down bullet points under Unlearn, I wrote down why I listen to young people. And I say this kind of often when I hear people, especially here where I live in the Philippines, where there's often there's a cultural obligation to listen to and defer to older people. And that's fine. But I tell people, if I want to know what's going on, like I ask young people, you know why? Because they live on YouTube. Like they get to travel the world all day, every day. And most people over the age of 30 or 40, like they didn't grow up in that era necessarily, and they got to work all day long every day. So young people, they know what's going on, and I love to learn from young people. I've heard you talk about similar topics, but I also noticed that you just explained to us a very leading edge technology that most people don't really get yet, and you do understand it. So clearly you've kept yourself evolving in the way that you learn. So I don't know, just talk about anything connected to that general
Yeah, well,
area.
like for me, again, it's about like you to really understand a topic, you have to sort of be a little bit invested in it, or you have to make a little investment in it. And sometimes that investment is time, sometimes it's energy, sometimes it's financial, whatever, right? But for I always say to people when they ask me about, what's cryptocurrency about, and how does it operate, or what's Bitcoin about, and my simple response to them always is, have you got like $50, like, or whatever it is? Buy some Bitcoin with that. And I guarantee you, that will change your intellectual curiosity and pursuit of that. Because initially you'll be like, oh, it's worth 55 today, or it's worth 47, or what. But then after that, you'll sort of wonder, like, what's going on here? Just this thing isn't just about like the price going up or down. What's the utility for this technology? Like, how is it going to impact the world? Why are people interested in it? How can I use it? What advantages does it have over the ability to send international payments in milliseconds versus it takes me 3 weeks to go down to the bank and send a wire from Ireland to the US, right? And so what's happening here? And I think I've always tried to sort of pursue that intellectual curiosity for myself, is when I see something that I'm like, this technology looks interesting, or it could impact or change business in some way. I'll do a small step or a small investment in it with time, energy, whatever it is, to understand what it's about and try and build something with it, or try and see how things could be built with it. And invariably, that's what actually leads me into understanding things, is that I'm doing things that are unfamiliar to me. They're novel and a result of doing this sort of uncomfortable, unknown behavior, it starts to become demystified to me, or I recognize patterns that I've seen in other technologies or other spaces. So while you and I are talking about this notion of different ways to sort of build communities and how your communities can fund you, sure, people understand VCs and going to a community of bankers and saying, I've got a great business idea, can you give me some money? Or they understand, instead of going to bankers, you could go to the general population and say, hey, I've got a great business idea. Do you believe in this idea? Why don't you fund me as a crowd? And everyone's like, wow, yeah, no, I understand that. Or now we're in this digital world where people are like, this is an idea I believe in. I'm going to create a digital company called the Decentralized Autonomous Organization. I'm going to write down the policies of that company in a contract that anyone can see, and all the policies are executed digitally, right? Like if we say we're going to sell the company when the price of oil drops below $4 a barrel, it will just happen because we've written it into the rules of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
It'll just be executed. And the way we're going to fund this company is we're going to create non-fungible tokens, and they're going to have avatars, and you can buy one of these to help fund the company, and we'll start building this autonomous organization. It's all the same stuff. It's just how it's implemented with the technology underneath it. It's just different. And I think that to me is, you only understand this stuff by doing it, by trying it, by experiencing it. And that's sort of what I always encourage people to do, is it's not the learning, it's the unlearning in many ways of not trying things, of not getting outside your comfort zone.
Mm.
Because that's sort of the magic I find. And as you say, like, speaking to different people, different genres, different domains, different diversities, whatever it is, like that's actually what is the really fascinating part, to go digging around and finding in this stuff. And it's super fun for me. I'm still learning. I am a novice, believe me. If you want to go onto some Discord channels and of these communities, and you've no idea whether you're literally talking to a 5-year-old or a 95-year-old, or male, female, where they are in the world, you name it. Like, you just don't know, and it is fascinating. And I think that is something that for me is, again, very innovative. We're like removing these sort of biases,
Mm.
right? All you know is that these people are this avatar or character or badge that you believe in the principles of that sort of community and what it represents, but you've no idea about who this person is, what they are. You can only observe what they say and how they behave. And that in itself for me is a massive innovation around sort of breaking norms, unlearning. It's just really fascinating.
Fascinating indeed. So for anyone who isn't familiar with your book yet, I definitely recommend checking it out. I found the principles very, very
Cool,
useful
thank you.
and real world applicable. Tell us a little bit about like what led you to write that book in the first place.
Well, the after we wrote Lean Enterprise, that book gave me a great opportunity to go and spend time with a lot of leaders in these massive organizations all around the world. And it was really inspiring to see some of the most brilliant, competent people I'd ever met. But they were all struggling, right? And what I kept realizing is that I could teach these folks like new techniques, new tools, new methods. But what learning new things was tough, but what was even harder for them was to let go of their existing mindset and behavior, because it had made them successful to date, right? So when you're sitting there talking to like the executive team of like, a Fortune 100 company and telling them everything that they know is wrong, they sort of look at you and go like, who the hell is this guy? And it's not that I'm telling them everything they know is wrong. Unlearning is a process, right? It's about letting go or reframing once useful mindsets and acquired behaviors that were successful in the past but are now limiting your success. So it's not forgetting, discarding, or removing your knowledge or experience. It's just a conscious act of letting go of outdated information and making space for new information to come in. Right. So, and a simple example of unlearning is the way that you can fund companies. Right. Most people believe I have to go to venture capital to raise money for my startup. The answer is no. You could actually mint an NFT, and if people, and you're good enough at communicating what your idea is about, people will purchase that NFT to be part of that community and thus fund the community or the company that you want to create and go and build it. Right? Like that is amazing that we can do these sorts of things, that people can communicate their ideas and be funded by their peers. That just is an unlearning, right? But most people are stuck in the mindset that I have to sort of make a pitch deck and go down to the venture capital companies on Sand Hill Road, and hopefully Sequoia will give me some money and off I go. Like it doesn't have to be like that anymore, right? There's so many options now, be it traditional funding revenues, crowdfunding, more familiar, NFTs, you name it. There's lots of different ways that you can start to get capital to get your business off the ground. And for me, again, with these execs, I was sitting there explaining to them that there are different ways to operate now. Technology has changed the way that you can interact with your customers, that you can communicate with them, capture, synthesize data, measure success, all of these types of things. And yet many of them have just grown up or been conditioned to either the companies that they're in or the way that they had previously worked. And that was my aha moment with Unlearn, is just like I could teach people when they're building products that you had to constantly innovate the features of the product for it to stay relevant in its market. Humans had behavior. And if you could constantly innovate your behavior to adapt to the market, you're going to be fine. But teaching people that system, the system of unlearning, has literally what I've been doing over the last number of years.
There's neural pathways to unwind, right? We get really attached, like it's even physiological. That's the fascinating part. It's like
absolutely right. And this is sort of the thing about growing new neural pathways. The only way you do it is you have to practice skills that are uncomfortable, that are unknown, and that you suck at. And because we avoid situations at all costs that are uncertain or unknown or we're not experts at, you cannot grow, right? And again, this sort of leads into some of Carol Dweck's sort of research and many others, is that the only way to improve is to keep trying new things and struggling and then tackling more and more difficult tasks with those new skills to keep improving, right? So whether you want to learn an instrument, no one picks up a piano or a guitar on day one and writes a symphony. They struggle. They cut their fingers when they're trying to play guitar on strings. They cramp up if they're trying to type on a piano after 20, 30 minutes of playing it. But it's this practice, this deliberate practice of trying to improve and take on more difficult, more complicated tasks as you build the fundamentals. Like that is how we progress. And again, it's just making this sort of small investments of time, energy, whatever it might be, to sort of start exploring these areas, I think is really key.
I love that. You don't know this, but I'm actually maybe about 60% through writing a book that I've been talking about for a very long time
Oh,
called
nice.
Scary
Congratulations.
Equals Happy. No, and I also want to say thank you, because in an interview that I heard another podcast where I was doing research on you, you said that when you wrote your books, you realized like it doesn't have to be sitting there typing out X number of words per day.
Yeah.
And I use Otter all the time, and I already kind of know this concept. I'm like, wait a minute, Barry actually wrote his books with verbalizing Otter and having somebody else edit it. Like, why the heck am I not doing this yet? So I think you just helped me accelerate finishing this book. But this book is just very simple, and it's designed to help people tune in to the concept that the scary stuff is exactly where the magic is. And like, if you can retune your brain to look for the things that make you uncomfortable, and instead of running away from them, as long as they're not going to kill you, that's where all the magic is. But we just, as humans, we spend so much energy accidentally, unconsciously avoiding growth by exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
I love
Fear.
that.
It all comes down to fear, right? Fear of the unknown, fear of the not in control of the result, fear of perception, and I think that's again why starting small is so important. Small is safe, it's safe to fail, it's easy
Right.
to try, it's a fast feedback loop. So you don't worry about trying to do something new, just start small and learn your way into these things. And I think that's the pattern that's very important.
Was there a time in your career or journey where you consciously realized, because I think you and I have come up with a lot of very similar life philosophies. You've said things like you are the product, and I've realized things in my life. There was a time in my early 30s, I think, where I started gradually realizing I had just been focusing only on doing and having, like figuring out what do I want and how do I execute, and not at all on who I was becoming. Like, was there a moment that you just realized that it's more important to focus on growing yourself than just figuring out how to do things? Or is this kind of a gradual just
No, that's a
belief
really
as you...
interesting question. I think this sort of "you are the product" statement is something I've become more overt about probably over time, and a lot of people have helped me with that. Right, like one person jumps out in particular is Gibson Biddle, who he's a chief product officer at Netflix in the very early days of when they were starting to stream there. And Gib has this notion of a personal board of directors where he sort of, has a bunch of people that he reaches out to for different skills, insights, and to challenge, keep him accountable to things, and he's obviously a product manager as well. And, it was one of these sort of conversations sometimes where you're like, yeah, like especially when you start a business that's sometimes focused more around yourself or consulting services or whatever, you start thinking of yourself as actually, right, like what features do I have? I've got like talks, I've got workshops, I've got programs, I've got accelerators, I've got, and that sort of thought of like you being a product and the features that you have and what features you need to innovate. Again, you probably heard me say it a few minutes ago, even with Unlearning, right? You start thinking of everything as a product. It's just one of these things I think happens to product managers. You look at everything as a product, and what are its attributes, what are it good at, what's its unfair advantages, where its weaknesses, how could you improve certain aspects of it. And for me, that's product thinking. And whether you're applying it to like traditional paradigms of a software product or business, you just start thinking of yourself like a product. And that's kind of where that statement sort of came from. And yeah, like it's been a helpful mental model for me to think about what's my vision, what's my roadmap to get there, what are my strategies, it measures the success for me, what things am I going to try, how am I going to get feedback about how I'm operating, what are my weaknesses to improve, what are the things, my strengths to double down on. It was just a natural sort of mindset to me. And yeah, I think I definitely would credit that sort of aha moment of you are the product, definitely from some conversations with Gib. And yeah, it's helped me. It's really has helped, being a good mental model for me to think about how and when I want to grow.
I wish I had mentors that would have kind of tuned me into that sooner, because it was my late 30s when I very much doubled down on setting aside financial and business success for a while, and just really kind of tripling down on learning and reading a lot more and trying to figure out who do I really want to be learning from. And I'm very glad I did that, even though it was kind of relatively late. But if I could give any advice to a young entrepreneur, I would be like, okay, be learning about the business. Yes, sure. But really, you got to focus on who do you want to surround yourself with, so that you can be becoming. It's like becoming overdoing is the way I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, and remember, longevity means we're all going to live well past 100. So you're not
Agree.
even you're halfway mark yet there, Eli. So
Agree
plenty of time
completely.
ahead.
I'm planning to 180. How about you?
My wife just jokes. She's got Chinese heritage, so she's going to live to 250, guaranteed. I'm Irish. I'll be lucky if I get to double digits. Never mind triple.
I'll assume you drink a little less because of leaving Ireland, maybe. Anyway,
Who knows?
we
Yeah,
can.
who knows? It's up for debate.
All right.
50% alcohol, 50% blood. That's me.
um, I heard you talk about, and I think some of these questions were actually in the book Unlearn, but I really appreciated some of the questions. And maybe I joined a workshop that you did before, and I was very impressed with the quality of the questions that you had posed there. But in order to ensure that we're continually disrupting ourselves, what kind of questions do you recommend people ask periodically to be able to diagnose where they need to unlearn?
Yeah, well, the questions to diagnose Unlearning are, I often ask people, like, where are you not living up to the expectations you have for yourself? Situations you're struggling with, or maybe even avoiding altogether. And maybe you've tried everything that you can think of and you're not getting a breakthrough. These are all signals that your existing behavior is not working, right? Not getting the outcomes you want, not living up to your expectations, situations you're struggling with, avoiding altogether, or you just look at ones and you're like, I just can't deal with that right now, right? They're all subtle signals that we don't know how to pass through. And that's a great moment to say it's on learning, right? Like, again, just like the feature, my feature's not landing, people aren't using it, I can't get it to work. That's again a signal, right? And so I think they're the questions I often ask folks. And whenever I do, it's not a case of them just coming up with like one or two things. They literally end up with a list about 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it's a case of actually getting them to pick one to focus on. So the good news is we've all got problems. Nobody's got it figured out. Nobody's sitting here going, like, people always have concerns and challenges and things they're trying to get better at, or can't figure out how to improve. So it's all good, and sharing those is actually quite a powerful step in itself. So, they're the kind of questions I would often put to folks to just think about. And then once you can sort of diagnose some of those areas where your existing behavior is not working, then it's really just a case of reframing it. What's the outcome you're really aiming for? And you mentioned the example of writing a book. Like, I'm dyslexic, of a solid history of D minuses in English literature. I still think if I met my school teacher and told him that I'd written 2 books, he would just laugh at me and go, "Don't believe a word." He'd just think I'd be joking. But for me, this notion, or the conditioning again, was that to be a writer, you have to sit at a desk, roaring fire with a red wine, typing like Hemingway, and that's what I thought writers had to do. But it didn't work for me. That wasn't me. And what I found and that was my signal to say, oh, I need to unlearn how to write a book. And then really I could reframe writing a book was not actually like typing, it was creating content. And when I reframed that I was trying to create content, that opened up a whole bunch of avenues about how you could create content, because typing, again, is just one method to create content. So then I could go, well, actually, what's my best way to create content was actually talking about it, and getting someone to interview me and transcribe the interviews, and edit them, and then we could have an MVP of a chapter and start iterating it really fast. And that was actually like a huge breakthrough for me in creating the book. And I just like, that was my aha Unlearning sort of moment, and who knows, it's great to hear it's inspired other folks to think that there are ways to do this. And again, technology changed the game, because with Otter AI or any of these transcription services, you can do it in real time. Right back in the day, to get something transcribed, I remember the writer that I started working with, he was like, "Oh yeah, I can get transcriptions back in sort of 2 to 3 days." And I was sitting there going to him, "Hang on a sec, pal, 2 to 3 days? Like, what are you doing? Are you giving it to someone to handwrite?" And then I introduced him to these tools like Otter, and he was just like blown away. He's like, because a transcription for him would have cost, like $10-$50 every time to, and I was like, "Give me $50 for the year, and I'll transcribe every single word you say for the rest of the year."
Yeah.
And again, he was blown away.
If you can talk more than 6,000 minutes, then you'll need 2 accounts. It's funny.
You got a problem.
Yeah. I was sitting in Singapore at a Starbucks, and She & Co, who you just interviewed recently on your show, is the one that showed me Otter, and it's been such a powerful thing. I use it, and I just use it every day. It's great.
Yeah, great. And great.
Cool.
Xian's amazing. Yeah, no, it's great to join that dot today as well.
Amazing. So kind of to wrap up, one of the things I heard you just say that I really like is how something like there is no finish, and there's nobody's done, nobody's got anything perfected. We're all just constantly iterating, and therefore
we're called Nobody Studios.
I love that name. And therefore, like, whether it's you trying to craft yourself as the product, or it's you building an actual product for other people to use, maybe tech, maybe not, one of the things that we've identified that's just so critical is making sure you've got great processes in place so that customers or other people are giving you feedback constantly, and that's informing all your decisions. So like, just talk to us as we kind of wrap up, because the audience here for the show presumably are a lot of people building products themselves. So what principles or philosophies do you prescribe, or do you subscribe to, when it comes to just ensuring that the customer is really co-creating the product or directing what you do?
Yeah, well, I think, again, most people never ask for feedback. I'll give you an example. Like today, someone was kind enough to ask me to contribute an article to a publication that they were writing. And I was delighted. So I shared one of the articles I'd written recently with them, and put it into their publication. And they did that. This was a couple of months ago. And then they were in touch again today, and they're like, "Oh, it's our year anniversary, and we're going to do another publication." I was like, "Oh, wow, that's great. Congratulations on getting to a year." They've done a number, like 5-6 publications. And the question that I asked him was, "Well, did you get any feedback on the article that I contributed, or the edition that I was?" And straight away, I could see them sort of go, "Oh, no, we get complaints, but I don't have any feedback." So he was able to say to me, "Oh, look, people didn't like that we printed it on a certain color background, and it was hard to read." And I was like, "Okay, well, that's some feedback, but did you get any feedback about the thing you did, right?" And or we did, and the answer was no. And for me, again, it's one of these things where if you are not systematically like making it easy for people to give you feedback on things that you're doing, you will never know. I was doing a mastermind event again this morning with, I think we'd like 15 executives from Fortune like 500 companies. And, you're often, when you do these roundtables, again, they always want to get feedback, but they ask like 2 weeks or a week after, or even hours after the event. And you have to understand that execs are like super busy. So if they go to an event, the time to ask them for feedback is not 40 minutes later, not 4 days later. It's to ask them right when they are in the event, because you will capture them. They're focused, they're listening, and you ask them at the end, "How could we make this better?" and make it easy for them to share that. You will get feedback, right? And again, even with presentations, and this is another great hack from Gib. So Gib figured out the best way to get feedback when you're doing presentations was not to ask people to give you feedback. Of course you should. But he figured out if you put up a QR code in the middle of your talk, people can just take out their phones, like point their phones at the screen and click the QR code and have a link straight away to an NPS survey. And he gets like, 60% of the audience giving him feedback for every single talk he does. So you can imagine how good his talks are because they've iterated and improved so much. Like he'd even say, you should always see his talk in the afternoon, never in the morning, because in the morning he'll do it, get feedback and make it better, and the afternoon will be better, right? And so I think you have to be like systematic with this stuff. Otherwise, it's just sort of anecdotal, and make it easy, make it timely, and ask for it. And I think, it still shocks me sometimes when I'm talking to people and I ask them for feedback when we're at the end of our time together, or even at the start of, or very rarely do people ever ask or hear people ask for feedback. And I think it says a lot, if you're really serious about improving, that you've got to really sort it out.
Totally agree. It's taken me a long time to get to the point where I'm purely desirous of feedback and not afraid of what I'm going to hear. And it's something I think inside of us that we have to work on. I think to get to that place as individuals is critical. And then as a company, if you're building something that you just, so I hear you saying shorten the feedback loop and then constantly work on systems and be creative about making it easier for people to get the feedback to you right away, or the easiest way they can at the right time.
Yeah, right.
Fair assessment. Okay. Amazing. Barry, I want to be respectful of your time, and we're hitting an hour. I'm hoping we get to talk like this again. And whether you said that thing about feedback or not, as soon as we get done here, I'm going to ask you for it. And I hope you give me some honest feedback so I can make this show better. Same thing to anyone listening. Please tell us.
Yeah, that's it.
What you think I can get better.
Feedback. I love it. Yeah.
Seriously.
Write it in the comments. Yeah. Say hello. It'll be great.
Absolutely. So I guess we're both asking for that. Tell us and tell Barry or me what you think we can do better next time. Barry, thanks for the time today. Really enjoyed it as always.
Pleasure.
And can you tell us where you would like people to find you should they want to?
So I think interest in Nobody Studios, please go to nobodystudios.com. We're pretty much Nobody Studios on every social media platform you can imagine. Or, if you're interested in more of my own work, it's BarryOReilly.com. And similarly, I'm at Barry O'Reilly at all good record stores. You'll probably find me in some social media platform at that. So do say hello and keep in touch.
Excellent. And I definitely recommend following Barry on social media and LinkedIn. I find a lot of valuable nuggets all the time as he puts content out. So thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Eli. Pleasure.
All right.